What's up, everybody? Welcome again to the Chasing Creativity podcast. This is episode 17 with film and television composer Julian Cisneros. Hey friends, episode 17 is here. This one, as always, I'm very excited to be able to release. This one is with Julian Cisneros. He is a film and television composer. Now, before we get into that, I want to just speak a little bit about that track that was just shared out here moments ago. That track is titled Formless from the producer Bisu. Now, Bisu is a friend of the podcast. He and I got to speaking via Instagram just about given episodes. Of course, I checked out his music and I wanted to share it out. You could hear by the track that was shared out, he produces at an extremely high caliber. And I just moving forward, I plan, to continue to do this. So if you are interested in having your music shown out, just simply reach out to me via Instagram or email. So at email, it's chasingcreativitypodcast@gmail.com, or on Instagram, chasing.creativity.podcast. I think it's a cool way to let this act kind of as like a platform where your music can be shared out to or shown out to, and all that cool stuff. So again, reach out if you're interested. Now, before moving forward, if you'd like to learn more about his music, you can go to his website at bisumusic.com. That's BISU music.com, Instagram at Bisu Music, so BISUMUSIC, or just simply search on Spotify. If you do go to his website, there's links there to get to Spotify or SoundCloud or all that good stuff. So go check him out. Again, all the support to him, and thank you for allowing us to hear that and allowing me to share it out on this episode. Now, switching gears a little bit, for today's episode, I was able to have a conversation with Julian Cisneros. Now, Julian is a film and television composer based in Los Angeles, California, and he's worked on projects for the likes of Disney and LucasFilm and Red Digital Cinema and Warner Bros, HasBros, Panasonic. That's really just to name a few. If you go to his website at juliancisneros.com, that's JulianCisneros.com, you can see all of his previous projects, see his music shown out there. And I'm not lying. I mean, this is just really to name a few. So definitely go check that out. But at the same point, learning about his path to getting to where he is today and just being able to speak with him, he is just an amazingly easy person to speak with, humble, and just a really kind person. So I just had an awesome time being able to do this episode and to be able to speak with him. And I really do hope you enjoyed it. I think you are going to. Now, before jumping into this episode, right before the interview, we're going to share out a song titled Northern Lights. Now, that was featured in a film called Under an Arctic Sky. This is it was an official selection at the Tribeca Film Festival. It's a documentary that follows surfers that surf some of the worst storms that hit Iceland. So very interesting, but I think the music fits it perfectly, and it gives a really good sense of his style that he brings to given projects. I just think it's it's a really, really beautiful track. So looking forward to sharing that out before the given episode. I do hope you enjoy it. Now, if you'd like to learn more about Julian, check out previous projects, check out his music. Again, check out his website, as I mentioned, or you can check out his Instagram as well at Julian Cisneros. So at JulianCisneros. Cisneros, excuse me. So check him out there. I just, again, can't say how fortunate I feel to have this conversation, and just how cool of a conversation it was. It was really, really cool. So I do hope you enjoy it. Now, before we jump in, last couple things about the podcast, and then we'll jump right into the episode. But if you are enjoying these episodes, please consider subscribing and rating and reviewing on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcast episodes, or Spotify for that matter too. All of those really help the podcast, seriously. It will give a little bit more exposure when people search for things like creativity or a different word associated with this podcast on, say, iTunes or Google Play or any of those things. And getting more eyes just means that this thing can continue to grow, and episodes will come out, and people will come on, and people will listen, all this good stuff. So I really do, if you're interested and you're enjoying the episodes, please consider doing so. Now that's really it. We're going to jump right into the episode. I don't think there's anything else pertinent to mention before jumping in. I will say next Wednesday, the next episode is going to be with a researcher who looks at why we listen to the music that we do. And he did some incredible studies that show some of the flaws in which titles and how we how we address music in general, and how we address art in general is really, really interesting. So look forward for that. Kind of switching gears again more to like that research vibe, if you will, for a given episode, and more cool things here to come towards the end of the year. It's incredible that we're almost in 2019. So that's it. I hope you enjoy it, and I will speak with you all again soon. Thank you for being on today. I super appreciate it. I think that's always an awesome way just to start a given episode. Just say thanks, man. I'm really excited about this episode.
Oh man, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on this. I love what you're doing. I love that you're just reaching out to different people and exploring kind of that creative process. And even the kind of the research aspect of it from like the professors you're interviewing, I think that's incredible.
Awesome.
Very,
Thanks,
very
man.
different and refreshing for sure.
Hell yeah, dude! Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. I really appreciate that. I've been having a blast so far, and I mean this one as well. I'm just as excited about because, looking at the breadth of work that you've put out thus far in terms of the compositions for film and television. I mean, it's crazy. So just to name a few here right off the bat, just to kind of cue listeners in and all that good stuff. I mean, you've worked with Disney, LucasFilms, Warner Bros, HasBro. I mean, it's pretty incredible. So I'm super excited about this. And I definitely want to dig into all the creative aspects behind those projects and your music and all this cool stuff. But if you don't mind, I kind of want to start like where it all started off for you. So like what was that like early on in your life? Did you pick up piano to start? Did you pick up guitar? I mean, where did this all kind of start for you?
It started with guitar actually. I was about 10 years old when I started playing, and it was kind of I don't know, it was more of like a requirement at the time. Like you got to play an instrument, and play sports. And so I was doing sports, and then it came time to like, you know what, let's play some guitar. But I was really into music. Like I had discovered, like I'm the oldest in my family, so there's no one to like show me music, and my parents weren't necessarily like, super into discovering new bands or anyone that, I would even like to listen to. So, it was always like my friend's older siblings and believe it or not, my friend's older sister had, she got the new Third Eye Blind album, came out in like 97.
Oh, yeah.
It was the first Third Eye Blind album, which I still love, but, that kind of really ignited something in me. I remember listening to how all the instruments came in. I was like, this is so cool. And so then I was like, I want to start playing guitar. So it started there and kind of progressed. And it's so funny because as I started to learn more and more about the guitar, I started to care less and less about, playing sports and stuff like that. And eventually I didn't even play them anymore. I just, started doing music, all the time.
Yeah.
So that's really where it started.
Cool. So then did you find early on, say like high school, that this was clicking as something that you knew you wanted to go into as like a career, or was it just like passion project, playing bands, all this kind of stuff?
I started to notice that, it came very easily. I didn't really take any lessons. Just a few where, they would, I learned like the main chords, the E, the A, the G, all that kind of stuff. But then it was probably in high school, I think around 15, when my parents bought a piano for my sisters who were taking piano lessons, and I just like hopped on it and started writing. And
cool.
I wrote something that I at the time thought was really great. And but it was more just the idea of like, wow, I can write something, and it just kind of happened. And I would ask my siblings like, hey, so can you write this? And they're like, what? Like, we can't write. Like, we don't know.
Yeah.
And it was like almost like a realization at that point, like, wow, I think I can do this. And then it kind of just kept. It was literally like a snowball, from that point, because then it was hooking up with friends who were also into guitar and playing music, and I really just grew real fast into starting to write. That was when like I had a little tape recorder, and I would just start recording straight into the tape recorder, and then in order to layer, I would play back through the speaker while I'm playing another line over it. It's just super rudimentary because it's before the Mac Pro days, MacBook days, or even the iPhone. It's so hard to record back then if you didn't know where to start. So.
I forgot about that until you mentioned that now, because I picked up a guitar, same when I was very young, and I totally like pushed that out of my memory that I would actually record on tape. That was because you forget, there wasn't computers, there wasn't iPhones to use the voice mic to record into. Yeah. That's
no,
funny.
I mean even when I did get when I graduated high school, I got a PowerBook. So that was before the MacBook Pros even came out. It was a PowerBook, and it had a little mic, and I didn't even know anything about an audio interface, nothing.
Yeah.
So I would just record with the little onboard mic, and I would layer on top of layer, and so it was just like by the end, it would just be so much muddy noise, just like mud, like, and I didn't even know what mud was. I was just like, wow, I'm getting ideas on top of ideas. This is great,
right?
And yeah, it is funny. I think the very first stuff that I actually recorded was into like an old mixing board onto a mini disc player. So someone would, my friend's older brother had a mini disc recorder, which
Yeah.
those were only around for like 5 years. I
remember those.
Nobody even had, no one talks about them. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
like completely useless technology,
Yeah,
but he had it, and that's how we would actually record, and it's so that I love that though. I think that whole aspect really like helped me. It was like a wasteland where there was no, you just had to figure out whatever you had at the time, and there's no research, no one telling me, hey, go check out like Sound on Sound magazine. No one was saying go online and watch tutorial. YouTube wasn't even around, which is madness.
Right. Today you can go on YouTube and there's so much information there to learn about, producing or writing music, the theory behind writing, all these different things. And you're right. I mean, back then I remember the same thing. There's just nothing out there. You kind of figured it out, you piece things together. And from my perspective, like I've just done all of this for fun, right? So this is just like total hobbyist. And like when I was young, I was playing music and all this stuff. But I remember, you just have to figure it out and see what the hell came out. And I remember I had a PowerBook 2 actually, and I remember there was GarageBand on there, so that was big. Like I would, play with GarageBand, but that was always either the predefined loops, or it was just kind of junk stuff. So you'd play with things, but yeah, it's always so cool to see where this started, because I don't know. From my perspective, when I look at someone, and I've done this my whole life, just being a fan of music, when I look at artists who have accomplished a lot, it's always fun to know what that process is like, just to know that, hey, they started, it might have been, 15 years ago or whatever, but that whole process for them, they started at ground zero too, and then they had to just power through and learn these different things, and then things start to click, and so it's always super, super interesting.
Yeah, everyone, very few that I know of started with their parents buying them a music studio,
Right.
And I do know people who start that way, and it's, I just look at them and shake my head. They don't even make music anymore,
Right.
Those kinds of people, it's a little bit of a different path when you have to really work for it. So
I
am
totally
grateful.
agree.
I'm grateful for that, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's super important. Yeah.
My parents were even trying to talk me out of, it was around towards the end of high school. I was like very clear on I'm doing music, and also, oh my gosh. So when I was graduating high school, I have no idea why I said this. Even to this day, I'm baffled that I would even do this. But people were like, well, what are you doing, for college now you're graduating? And I told people that I got into USC to go to their film scoring program. And like, complete lie. I don't even know why. Like, looking back, I just think it was completely ridiculous that I would even do that. But it was like a weird thing. I hadn't even wrote any sort of film music or anything like that. It was like a weird, like, I think this is something I love and I want to do.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to tell people that I don't know what I want to do,
Right.
And so just whatever, I'm never going to see you again. So I'm going to go to USC. And definitely didn't do that, of course.
Yeah.
But the reason I brought that up was my folks were even trying to, they sat me down with different business friends of theirs, very successful people who tried to talk me out of, a music career, and, did nothing, of course.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Well, it's funny because, I mean, music can be, there's no straightforward path, right? You have to be kind of entrepreneurial in a sense where you're working on your own music, and then you have to expose it to other people, and you have to build it all out yourself to create that path to kind of where you are today. So, from a parent's perspective, it's understandable. It's like, oh, this is
totally.
is, yeah. But I mean, I totally see it too. It's when you have that passion for something, and it's just like, this is it, it is. And you kind of just have to jump in and see what comes of it,
Yep. Yeah. No, for sure. And I do not blame any parent who's like, yeah, you probably should have a plan B, or at least, you have to go through that. I think that's like your first step towards the, I think, a career making music, is you have to get through all the people basically saying, don't do it,
Yeah.
And, if you make it through that first little hurdle, then there's plenty of hurdles along the way, but that's probably the first one.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you find, I'm just assuming here, you find that when you're tasked with that process where, okay, you're done with high school, you want to do this, you have to be, and as you mentioned, people saying, okay, maybe try a couple of different things. You have to be super resourceful to say, okay, I know this is the end goal. I'm
Mm-hmm.
here today. Now I have to figure out everything in between to get to where I want to be. So that can kind of, I would imagine that would really kind of light the fire and be like, okay, I got to produce a
Yeah.
lot every
Yeah.
day,
Uh-huh.
and get really good at this. Cause yeah.
No, for sure. That it like said it. You become very determined at that point because you don't want to fail. Because I said I'm going to do this.
Right. Right.
And
So what was it like then between kind of that stage and then from what I understand reading your bio in 2010 you were producing for iOS, right? So that I think is kind of where your career started. So between those two stages, if you will, what was that like?
well, after high school, I actually moved to England, and so I moved to England, and I I ended up hooking up with a band while I was there,
Mm.
and I played bass in this band, and this the lead singer of this band was a music supervisor, so he would place music to films, and so he started the band because he wanted to put his own music in there and kind of double dip a little bit.
Uh
Um, don't blame him at all. It's the way to do it. And
yeah.
so he had these great songs, and so I joined the band, and we got I got to play all around England, and that
Oh,
really kind
nice.
of set the course for me. And when I moved back home, let's see, now I'm like 19. I moved back to LA or Orange County, and uh, started a band, and try to do the band thing. I really wanted to be kind of like a rock star, to be honest. I wanted,
Uh-huh.
I had that dream. I would see U2 concerts and it just blow my mind, all the people. And
Yeah.
I just like, I want to be Bono. And I want to, I loved the aspect of, helping people as well as, making music. And so he
Right.
was really someone that was an inspiration to me during that time. And that
Mm.
really forced me to write music. And so I wrote a lot of songs, and I kind of realized it was so hard for me to write lyrical music,
Mm.
like trying to write a rock song, like I I didn't have much to pull from, to be honest. Like, I came from a
Mm.
great house, a great home. Yeah, I didn't have any real tragedies to pull from. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I just found my music bland. And even though, the band, we made good music, and we did stuff, played shows and stuff like that. I, just wasn't really clicking.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I went on a trip actually to Africa. I went to Kenya, and I was there I was helping out just with the people down there. We were doing like some microfinancing in the slums, and there
Mm.
was a guy on that trip who was he was filming a documentary, and this is now 2009. So
Yeah.
I'm on this trip, and he's like, "Hey, you do music. You're in a band. I know you're in a band. Blah blah blah. Would you be interested in maybe writing something for this film we're working on? I mean, you are
Yeah.
here. You can pull from the inspiration of being here." And I said, "Absolutely, absolutely." So that was really the first opportunity to write something. And the funny thing is, he never ended up making a documentary.
Uh-huh.
But what it did is it got me to write like this. I think it was about a 7-minute cue,
Yeah.
and got the band together, recorded them, and everything like that, and just wrote this really kind of cinematic piece, really guitar-driven sound design kind of stuff.
Mm.
And then during that time, he was in film school, so there's other people that were in film school and doing stuff. Actually, he was graduated already, so now this is kind of working with people that are coming out of film school. So
Yeah.
their friends kind of start hearing about me, and I start doing, short films for these people. And
Mm.
there's a handful of, directors I started making relationships with. And at that point, I'm living in a town called Corona, which is a small town. And it's not really, there's no film industry there. There's no, and this is kind of weird because I was going a direction of trying to be this, big rock star. And I found that all of a sudden writing music like this for picture, that like came so easily, and it just like
Yeah.
kind of surprised me, blew my mind. And kind of started to remember back in the day, you know, back in high school where I was, telling people I'm going to do that, and
Yeah.
it started to feel like, oh my gosh, like, okay, this is kind of clicking. And more and more projects kept moving on, and a year goes by, and that's when I was actually introduced to an animation company making interactive storybooks for the iPad. So now it's 2010.
Mm.
The iPad just drops. I think it came out in like early 2010, or maybe it was late 2009. I'm not sure, but right around that time, this animation company started up, and they needed music for one of their stories. So I was introduced because I was the only guy in town that actually was doing anything like that, who
Oh
could
yeah.
actually provide an audio file,
Yeah.
actually write something, specific towards what they wanted, take
Right.
direction, collaborate. And that's how that kind of started. So that was kind of the gap in between like high school and, so now I'm kind of like, I'm around 23 years old at
Yeah.
that point.
Dude.
And
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say I didn't mean to jump in there, but that's so incredible that you go on this trip, right? And you're doing it for totally different reasons. You want to help people. You're going on this trip to Africa, and its intention is, as I mentioned, to help people. And what a fortuitous event that someone's on the same trip that needs help with film composition. That it kind of works. That you meet this person, and then it turns out that you could produce for a film, even if it didn't happen, even if it didn't go through all the way, for it to click and to give that spark to move you in this direction it's so bizarre to me. I think that those little like coincidences or whatever you want to call them are so incredible because it was like right place, right time. You put in the effort, and then it's almost too weird. It's so bizarre.
no,
You know?
no, absolutely. My life has been littered with events like that,
Yeah.
and it's, really, I think, helped push me forward, to this point, till this phone call. I mean, it's really just been, kind of, I don't want to say right place, right time, or just like it just, I guess you could say that, but I do think there's something more behind it. I think,
Yeah.
I personally just felt that like, there's just like almost divine intervention, like you just,
Yeah.
there's no other way to describe it, or to
Right. Right.
define it. It's just like it just happened that way, and that was
Yeah.
certainly
It's all
one of
yeah.
them. And as we continue down the career path, that happened multiple other times, and so
Oh, that's so cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I think some of those, whatever you want to call them, are just too weird for it not to be something else. Like I just always get I don't know what it is. It's just funny in that sense. It's funny to think about that and be like, just someone can brush off as right place at the right time, but it's just so dang weird that all of those things come together in that moment that it makes you think, man. It's interesting. So that's cool. So this kind of puts you into this place where you're now working with this company who is developing for iPads, and you are now the music behind it. So you're doing the music for these releases.
Yeah. So then, that was the first time I ever made any money, and that was cool. I was like, wow, okay, this is actually, this is interesting, and,
Yeah.
at that point, that was when I, started dating my now wife, and I, started realizing like, this is a real serious kind of career. I think I'm on a career path here. I think that this is really, this isn't just fun and games. This is really something I can turn into something. And, doing stuff with this small team was really cool. And they had some great recognition because they were one of the first, animation companies doing anything like that for the iPad, and it was such a fresh technology then that, if you were one of the first people to come out with like a storybook app, like you were the only person doing that. So you're at the top of the Apple, top of the App Store, and so this company, we were on the top of the App Store for a while. So we'd get invited to go to these animation conventions, and I started to brush shoulders with people who were, really doing stuff. And, that was really cool, because then my mind, then I started making trips to Los Angeles, and to
Hmm.
movie studios, and you're like, whoa, like this is really cool. Like this is,
Yeah.
moving forward. And, I think, um, creatively as well, it was just really cool, because, we would do, the first thing I did was like this, it was called Cosmo's Day Off, and it was like this, 50s throwback kind of alien. It was a
Uh-huh.
little alien. Just to reference what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was a little alien who would, I don't know, just play around, and you just read stories about his little life and his adventures. And so, moving from that to then like this, Snow White app, so writing more whimsical music, and then moving from that to writing pirate music, because we did like this pirate puzzles app. That was
Yeah.
really like kind of stretching for me, and also
Oh,
an
yeah, yeah.
indicator to me that I can really do this. Like I could take on multiple genres. Doesn't have to be the same thing. And even with the pirate apps, I had to write I had to write music that had lyrics and stuff, melodies. And so pull that, it was cool to pull from the old band days and stuff like that. So that was a great experience. And that was during that time, that company had so much going for it. They were getting hit up by Disney to make apps for them, by
Oh, yeah.
Harper Collins, the giant publisher, Penguin, giant publishers who were like, we have all these properties and we want you. We even got hit up by the Peanuts, whoever owns
Yeah.
Peanuts, like
Yeah.
Charlie Brown and all that,
Yeah.
Snoopy. And, the owner really wanted to kind of forge our own way. But unfortunately, we ran out of money as time went on, and eventually the whole thing just dried up.
Yeah.
And I find myself, I guess in between that time, I was it stopped me if I'm giving too much history, but
Oh, no. This is no, not at all.
in between that time, I ended up getting married. And funny story, and this is another one of those like kind of divine things that I, divine kind of occurrences, where I just showed my girlfriend at the time, my bank account, which had like $10. I had $10 to my name, and I just said like, look, like I'm gonna be a composer. I believe it. I've, it's deep in my soul. I know I'm gonna do this. And but I'm broke, and I don't know if I'm gonna ever make any money, when I'm gonna make money next.
Right.
And she happened to be the daughter of a director, a well-known director, who made animation. And so he made Pinky and the Brain, Animaniacs, Johnny Bravo, Jackie Chan Adventures, the old Batman animated
like
series.
childhood.
My childhood too. So, so she looks over at me with this big smile on her face, and she's just like, when my dad, moved us here, I was, like 7, and we were on food stamps. My dad was trying to make it. So she, like, if there was any girl on earth that I could end up with, it's this girl who, no girl would have given me time of day. They would have ran away like, oh, this guy's broke and he wants to be a musician. Like, yeah, right. But no, she was like, I'm all in. She's like, I know how this goes. And even her dad, I mean, when I asked her if I could marry her, asked him if I could marry her, he's like, well, how much money you got? I was like, at the time I had like maybe $2,000. And he's like, wow, that's more than I had. And like, while he was actually storyboarding a Batman, a scene for Batman, it was crazy. Yeah. Just like I said, just crazy, So when we got married, that's when we moved out here to Santa Clarita, which is in northern LA County. And that's, where she's from. So that put me in a whole nother arena. So now like the app thing dried up, but now I'm in LA. And now I'm able to start meeting different types of people who are actually doing stuff. So, that was kind of the progression there,
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a couple things there that are just like mind blowing right now, that it's so strange. And again, just to talk to those fortuitous events, you see it again here, as you mentioned. One thing that just immediately came to mind, I'm a big fan of a podcaster named Duncan Trussell. I think this is where I heard this from, or maybe it was somewhere else, but he's very much into spirituality of all sorts, right? He's just like this really eccentric guy, and he's talking about all these interesting things, and I listened to it for fun, right? But something came up on, I think, a given episode where when you're going on this path that's like it's right for you, these like weird fortuitous events will happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to it for fun, right? I don't know like what level I kind of commit there, but just listening to your story, it's so much like that. Like you've committed to this path, and once you've kind of committed to it, you're moving forward with it. These weird kind of synchronicities or fortuitous events kind of open up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you might agree that if you're trying something, right, you're working on something and you're just hit with no after no after closed door after closed door after closed door, and of course with something that is going to be hard to achieve, there's going to be no's, but there might be maybe even like a small difference there where you can get so much pushback that you're like, I'm going around the wrong path right now. Like I'm getting so much, like it just doesn't feel right. You know, maybe like with the band thing, you know, it just like doesn't quite click. And then when you switch gears here and moved into this other path, boom, like things just start opening up and these events start happening.
Yeah, it was like a waterfall. And I agree with you. I think that it's really hard to identify or maybe communicate to people. I think everyone has to individually realize either I'm moving in the right direction or this is just too much opposition. It's, I still struggle with telling people like, yeah, I don't know, man, like maybe you shouldn't go for this.
Right.
But I get asked that a lot now, like, how do I make it, and I just think, gosh, like, I don't know. I mean, my life, I heard Hans Zimmer once say, someone asked him if one of his kids wanted to become a composer, if he would support them. And he said, absolutely not. I think that was, I'm paraphrasing it, but what I got from it was more the sense of like, it's too competitive and there's way too much luck involved, and it's just, you're going to get destroyed. And I mean, I don't know. I think, but I understand to some degree what he's saying there. It's just that I think his career in a lot of ways, if you probably were interviewing him, maybe there's a lot of those types of events as well, where just doors were opening up and it was just kind of right place, right time. And so, yeah, I think it is good and very important to pay attention to when, man, like I am just trudging through mud and it's, this is too difficult. I don't know what to do. It's always good to be wise, I think, and realistic. And, you always got to put food on the table. You always got to have a roof over your head and provide for whoever you need to provide for. And, I think some people might take it too far where they, they don't care to like, this is, I am in the middle of success right now when I have nothing. And it's like, well, maybe you should try maybe doing it on the side of something else as well. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
But,
no, it's such an interesting, it's an interesting thing because, as you're right, I think everyone has kind of a different gauge for it a little bit, where it's a personal thing. Like you have to kind of feel it for yourself and see, right when you're in the middle of it, like, is this going the right way? Like, what do I do to kind of course correct? What can I do here? So I don't know, man. So far your story's just been totally fascinating. I just had no idea of any of this really before we had spoken. I looked into I looked into
that's
projects,
not online.
I listened to your music.
That's definitely not online.
Oh, it's so cool. And another thing that you had mentioned here that I wanted to address was when you were finding that the projects were very different, right? So even the pirate theme, I would imagine writing something that sounds very Pirates of the Caribbean, pirate themed, right? Is like, that would be very difficult if you don't have that background. So did that click then when you were doing that? I mean, what was that process like to learn different genres? Is it something where you could listen to previous works and kind of get a sense of like what this sound is like and then go from there? Or what was that like?
No, you nailed it. I mean, luckily there was YouTube at that time, because that's kind of straight where I went. And that was my first experience where I was literally kind of outside I'd never written a pirate song. And so I'd never, analyzed what kind of music or instruments are even going on behind it. And so, of course, I start with Pirates of the Caribbean, and then, you just YouTube pirate music, and there's just tons of pirate music
Yeah,
online.
yeah.
And, you kind of just listen to, um, what's happening musically, tonally, and
Hmm.
obviously you have to have fun and imagination when you're writing pirate songs. That's probably still one of the funnest projects I think I've ever been a part of, because it's just
Uh-huh.
so far out there and so silly, and plus you're writing for kids, so you want to be silly and over the top and
Right, right.
telling these crazy tales, and so that was really fun. But that really was, the first time leading towards, now when I get, asked to do something maybe a little outside of maybe my wheelhouse, like I just kind of immerse myself in the music,
Mm.
and and then it kind of just starts to come out,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so that's like specifically how that process went.
Hmm. Well, then, so I would imagine here, kind of at that stage of your career, a lot of the work is probably done on the computer, right? Like in a DAW, piano roll, like working with plugins that are in the DAW, just because starting out, that's kind of the way to approach it. And I've seen the studio now that you have, some physical analog synthesizers. So one thing that just jumped out at me right away was I really want to dig into kind of the creative process, of course, behind just addressing a new track right off the bat, like what that's like for you. But the transition between going from, say, working directly on your computer and then now having kind of this creative freedom to move into some
Mhm.
analog synths or some modular synthesizers, like what's that like?
Oh man, well that is that whole process was again in itself a little bit of a journey, because yes, at that time it was all kind of in the box, there's no other
Yeah.
way. I didn't even I didn't even have believe it or not, at that time I was still in Corona, so I was still in a environment where there weren't any real professional people doing anything that I could ask questions. So I was using stock Logic virtual
Oh, wow.
instruments. So I
Yeah.
was making money already using just stock Logic virtual instruments. And I still think to
Yeah.
this day you could still do it. I could
Yeah.
still make it
Yeah.
happen with, I mean, it's they're so incredible. But I mean, so that was my real introduction to having to use virtual instruments, because and thank God I was using Logic, because Logic had them. If I was using Pro Tools, I
Yeah.
would have been screwed. I would have been like, I don't know what to do.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was in Logic, and Logic, has that little tab you open right up, and it's like, what instrument do you need? So,
Yeah.
do you need a harp? Do you need a piano? Do you need, strings, pizzicato strings, staccato strings, whatever. So, that was kind of that, like, I ended up spending so many years in the box, because then
Uh-huh.
from there I discovered Contact. And then once you're in Contact, then there's,
Oh, yeah.
Complete with all those different instruments. And so then the quality of music got better, because the samples got better. and
Mhm.
and then in 2013 you know i I actually started working. I was introduced to someone who was working for Cinesamples. I don't know if you're aware of their virtual instrument company. So then I started working actually on virtual instruments. So I just,
Mm.
really went like, I didn't touch a
Oh,
real
that's
I
awesome.
didn't touch
Yeah,
a
yeah.
real instrument for years. And
Uh,
and I think I had to do that. I had to learn and master using, instruments in the box, and
mm.
um, utilizing the technology and understanding the technology. And then it wasn't until maybe a few years ago where I think I kind of hit a wall there, and I'm just like,
Mm.
man, I'll tell you what happened. My buddy bought like this expensive guitar, this brand new expensive amp, and he's like, dude, you got to play it. And I used to be pretty good at the guitar. And
Uh-huh.
so I pick up his guitar, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. Uh,
Uh,
I just strummed an open E, and I just was like,
yeah.
this sounds great, bud. Like, way to go, man.
Yeah.
Like, and,
Yeah.
I realized like, oh, I'm not even a musician anymore. I've become this like glorified, you know, programmer,
Oh,
computer
yeah.
programmer.
Yeah.
And that was when it really like struck me so hard. And that was when I was like, I got to get, out of the box. And I just bought this little Arturio Micro Brute. And that was the first thing I
Oh,
bought outside of the
yeah.
box. And it was like, oh, this sounds so cool. I didn't even understand synthesis to that, very well. And
Yeah.
then it was just like a snowball. And of course, like, now that I want to buy, synths and stuff like that, like I wanted to buy good ones that could last and actually,
Yeah.
serve a purpose. So, they're not cheap. So then,
Right.
you start accumulating slowly. But that really was, I think that being outside the box is so important. And now I'm just this huge advocate for it, because even today, I don't know if you saw my most recent Instagram post I just posted today.
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
Where I was with that, I had, two pedals and this little, Casio keyboard, and I make my own pads, and it's just like, it's really easy to pick up a contact instrument and just like play it, hit your MIDI keyboard. But if I can just spend 10 minutes with my guitar and a microphone, I mean, the whole process is actually fun. And I think that that was something that got sucked out of just using the computer. And, kind of, as I've purchased more and more gear outside of my computer, as you've seen in like, Instagram photos and stuff like that, like I mean, God, it's addicting. I mean, right now is, Black Friday is upon us. So you better believe I am just like, what is going to be the best deal? Like, I don't, I do want to say though, even though all these fun toys are great, I think that like you can prematurely jump into those toys, and I do think that you can do so much with so little. I mean, I was in England actually a couple weeks ago or last month, and I got a call for a project, and I just had my laptop, a little keyboard. I luckily brought a little mobile rig just in case. And, I did that whole project just on my laptop with a tiny little MIDI keyboard, the whole thing, and headphones. And I don't like that. I don't think the result was as good as it could have been if I was in my studio, but you can still do a lot with so little these days. It's insane.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you're a fan of.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of Fortet? Do you know him by chance?
No.
Well, he just wrote this new album. Actually, last year came out with it, but it's been my favorite album this year. It's called New Energy, and it's just phenomenal. But he wrote the whole thing just with his laptop and two, crappy monitors. I mean, literally like bottom of the barrel studio monitor speakers. And just like a crappy, PreSonus. Sorry, PreSonus, but yeah, just like like a lower end interface, and it's just like you don't need all these fun things anymore. But they are freaking.
But they are fun.
As far as creativity goes, since we're on the Chasing Creativity podcast, it is it's Pandora's box in the best ways. I mean, it just keeps me in love with what I do.
Yeah. No, I think that the 2 episodes back, it'll be for when this records, Rhett, he mentioned that same album. I'm almost certain. I think he was mentioning Fortet. He posted like on Instagram where he's like, this is what I used to put out the most recent albums. You mentioned it was just like basic monitors, like basic audio interface and a laptop. Like that's it. And I think people are going to yell now. They're going to hear that I'll repeat the same thing. But I'm almost certain that Porter Robinson, if you're familiar with Porter Robinson's music, I'm almost certain that Worlds was put out with all stock FL Studio plugins. Like that was it. He just, it's one of his albums. I need to go and look into that. And a buddy told me this, so I need to kind of go verify. But that's the thing now, like with, say, Ableton or FL Studios or Logic or whatever you use, out of the box, there's just the possibilities are really endless. Like, absolutely. I mean, I watch, for fun, I'll watch Deadmau5 stream on Twitch, and he has like a beautiful studio with like a wall of modular synthesizers, right? But he's doing mostly everything in one VST Serum made by Steve Duda. Like, it's great. Yeah. It's crazy, So it's a really cool time to be able to work on music for that reason, because you can go balls to the wall and have all of these awesome tools, and it's extremely fun. But starting out, you can do it on a PC and be able to make it work.
100%. And yeah, like those guys are the DAWs themselves come with so much, especially Ableton. I mean, geez Louise, Ableton. I'm actually like. I don't have Ableton, but I respect it so much. I just want to buy it just to like use its workflow, because I know what it does, and I just think like, oh my gosh, like anytime I see like Skrillex or something like that, he's always in Ableton. He's just doing his thing. But even like, are you familiar with Grimes?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, so her album, and I just read this somewhere, but like her first album, she did all in GarageBand, the whole thing.
Oh
Even
yeah.
using GarageBand samples,
That's
GarageBand
crazy.
synths,
Yeah.
and like some of their famous songs like Genesis, and that's the only one that I can remember off the top of my head. But hey,
Yeah.
it's just like you really don't need that much, especially if you're making electronic music, because you're
Right.
using a computer. But
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. So then for kind of today, right? So you have these awesome. I've seen pictures of your studio on Instagram, which I'm like eternally jealous of. Like you have awesome rigs. Like I saw the Moog Sub 37. The what is it?
the
Dave's
Prophet
what?
6.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the Prophet 6.
yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So when you're addressing a new project, where's your go-to? Like, where do you start? Are you looking at maybe film clips from the project you're working on to get a sense of like what the sound needs to be to tie it to the picture, be it commercial, be it film, or are you starting out in front of a keyboard and just kind of seeing what comes?
Well, yeah, it always starts with the picture. So
Mm.
I try as best I can not to start on anything until there's picture lock. So picture lock means the edit's not going to change, and
Uh-huh.
what you see is what it's going to be, and that really helps me to make critical decisions as I'm going. And typically, you don't have much time to work on something, so it always starts with the picture, and there's always for the most part there is temp music.
Mm.
So you got they've put music placeholders there along that they've
Interesting.
edited
Okay.
to. I don't know if are you familiar with with temp music?
No.
Okay, so
No. Uh-uh.
let's say you're doing something, and I'll use an example. I was a recent project, and they had so they have like some cue from Interstellar, and they're
Mhm.
underneath while they're editing, and they're editing to like kind of the hit points in that, one of that one particular cue, but obviously they can't use it,
Right.
it's,
Right. Right.
and so then, most projects come with existing music already, but they can't, it's more just to communicate kind of what they're going for
I
and what
see.
kind of
Yeah.
sound they want, what kind of genre they're going for. So it's definitely a little helpful because it kind of it helps you get in their head. And again, like, film composing is very different from trying to, being an artist where you're writing, your own music, your own EP, your own LPs, your,
Uh-huh.
singles, whatever. Because at that point you can just be creative and no one cares what you're doing. It's just you.
Right.
But of course, like, and nowadays that the projects are so much bigger, there's like full on production teams. There's, just
Oh
tons of
yeah. Yeah.
people involved. So by the time it gets to you, you really, have to be, you have to listen, you have to know what they want, and you have to give them what they want. But
Yep.
then they also work with you because you put your spin on it. You put your originality, your own touch. And so, a lot of what I do now is like, or a lot of what I've kind of been learning and still learning is how to balance that where,
Mm.
I effectively create music that, is in the same vein of what they wanted, based on like their temp music and their notes, and also writing something completely original that is, my own sound, so
Right.
it's like a interesting kind of, dance, balancing act. And so I start with that, and then from there, I typically, from a practical standpoint, then I usually just grab the piano. So I start on a
Uh-huh.
piano, and I will, kind of start mapping out the melody, the chord progression, and I usually do that just with piano because
Mm.
that's the basic way you can start, just creating the flow of everything, and then also because it's MIDI notes and it's piano, I can then start like, what I do is like I'll copy and paste like into, my template. So like into, string, the strings or the horns or,
Oh right. Right.
and then,
Yeah.
it'll just start playing back the same chords, but obviously now it's like, legato, sustained notes or short notes or whatever.
Yeah.
And, kind of start building from there. And then, you know, occasionally I will start off with actually my Prophet 6. If I'm going to start off with something different, like maybe like a tone or like
Mm.
a unique sound, I'll usually go for my Prophet 6 because it's a polysynth. So I can play chords, whereas like the Moog Sub 37, it's a monosynth, so it's more good for like arpeggiating lines and stuff like that. But if I'm trying to really start from scratch on a cue, I will usually go with the Prophet 6 or a piano, and that really kind of sets a good foundation for things.
Yeah. Oh, that's it's so interesting to learn about what that process is like, because I think about, working for, say, a project that's going to be, film related or for television, right? There's going to be so many factors that you have to kind of fit within, right? So they might have, as you mentioned, like a theme, right? A different, like, or a certain idea for that film. So I see it as, it can be like, how I look at it is exciting because they're like limitations, if you will. So there are these different parameters you have to work in, and almost for that reason, and I'm kind of basing this off of an interview I listened to with Oliver Arnolds, where he will have like one instrument and he'll try and stick with that for working on a piece, because with those limitations, he finds he can be like way more creative, right? So rather than doing whatever the heck you want, when you have these limitations with a project, I could maybe guess, if you will, that it can have influence on like that creative process.
Yep. No, I've probably seen that same interview with Oliver, and he's totally right. I think that constraint is a beautiful thing. I think like, I have been overwhelmed. I mean, if I listen to music from a few years back that I wrote, there's too much going on, because at the time there's just so many options. It's like, oh, this feels empty, therefore I must add a new instrument or a new sound. Where it's like, no, like, if you know how to work with what you have, right now I'm really trying to simplify what I do, my music, and I'm taking cues from a pop artist, a pop producer. I don't even know his name. He's like a Swedish guy. He wrote like every single top 40, song for like Britney Spears and Sync. It's not Dr. Luke, who is like the producer. It's like the actual songwriter. I don't know his name. Okay. But I heard him say once that his he's like Scandinavian, but he said one thing which always struck me. And he's like, at one point, there's always only 3 things going on. That's all that's like his rule for like writing a good pop song. There's only one, 3 things going on. And I think I've heard that years ago, and I'm barely starting to like see the wisdom in that, because I think if I can get 3 things to just really shine well, then the music is actually better than if I just have like, 10 things going on. It's like, it's confusing. And I just think for film particularly, you have sound effects going on. You have someone talking. I mean, you don't, as the music, you don't necessarily need to have so much going on. And so I'm really like practicing the art of like restraint and, implementing as much as I can this whole 3 thing rule, whatever it is. I have to see if he has a name for it, because it's so smart. I mean, and it's hard with the orchestra because you have so many instruments. You have so many things happening. But maybe it's just percussion, horns, and bass, or strings, or if I'm writing string lines, I don't know. I think it still is hard to do 3 things happening at once. But as much as I can, I try to get it as close to 3.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. It makes me think of I don't know if you're familiar with the electronic artist Lane 8. Have you heard of his music, or have you heard of him by chance?
No.
Okay. So I actually just got to see him this last weekend. It was amazing. And he is extremely successful. Like, so he is like, I'm trying to kind of frame it well. So he's really kind of risen to the top of this kind of genre he's almost defined, where it's minimalistic not minimalistic. That's not the right way to put it. It's deep house that is, in my opinion, the standout tracks of his they're not cluttered with a bunch of stuff going on. It can be like a few parts that are just so well put together that it clicks as a beautiful song. And I think that there's really, really an art to it, because it can almost make it more challenging to say, okay, I'm going to start with a very, very simple lead. Like a few notes that are going to arpeggiate, right? And it starts out in some of those tracks, it seems almost like it's going to be too simplistic and might not just be interesting, but the way that he'll layer just a couple of the components in and the structure of a song takes it to another level, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful piece. So I think that touching on those things, like removing things, not trying to get like too cluttered. I've seen it with some of the artists that I really look up to, is that simplicity can just be what will distinguish it as just something beautiful. Yeah,
absolutely. That whole less is more thing.
Yeah,
yeah. It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah, and I think of Deadmau5 too. I mean, he's had some songs that are just so. There's only a few components going. Like the song that comes to mind, I don't know if you've heard of the song "Pets" by Deadmau5, but it's like 3 things going on in the song for like 4 minutes, and it's one of my favorite songs. I mean, it's just like everything fits perfectly. And sometimes that's what makes it just over the top. Like that's what nails it. Yeah,
totally. I love Deadmau5. I don't know that song particularly, and I haven't listened to much of his more recent stuff. The last album I bought was a White Album.
Oh yeah,
starts with the first song starts with an A. That's all I can remember. I can't remember the.
Let me.
Yeah, I could probably.
I know what it is. It's
I could probably pull it up.
While One Less Than Two.
Yep.
That one?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
that's a great album.
It is. It's like a double album, I think, or
it's
really
a lot
long.
of like a lot of piano, a lot of just like kind of strange ambient stuff. That's a super cool album.
I do remember actually there was a more recent album he came out with that was like all analog synth stuff.
What
was that one called? It was something like, music I grew up with, or what was it like?
So he did that one was 2014. 2016 he had the it's like W:/2016 album.
Mm-hmm.
And that was named by like a person on Twitter, I guess. He's like, I don't know what the hell to call this album. And someone's on Twitter, it's like, well, where are you keeping on your computer? And he's like, the W drive, and then that's what he called it.
That's so funny.
Yeah, that one's a little bit more electronic, especially compared to the While One Less Than Two. That's one of my favorites too. I mean, yeah, he makes awesome.
Oh, he's great. I really like that guy. I love watching him and stuff. I like his, I've never seen anything on Twitch. I've just seen like maybe his YouTube videos that get posted where he's like, on Twitch musing about something. But I think he's so real, I really appreciate that. I think he is a true he's like the perfect balance of like tech and art in a sense where but he's also self-aware and he doesn't take himself seriously, and he's a great artist. He was the first time I ever heard dubstep. Was that song was it Raise Your Weapon? I mean, I remember people told me like there's this new genre called dubstep. I was at at a Halloween party, I remember clear as day, and I was like, a new genre? And they're like, it's called dubstep. And I'm like, what? They're like, it's like Transformers having sex. And I was like, and now when I think about it, like at the time, early dubstep was totally that, like it's just madness, just like, and and he's like, you got to try someone called Skrillex, and then there's I already knew Deadmau5, and then that whatever album Raise Your Weapon is on came out, I think like shortly after that conversation, and I was listening through, and then I just like was listening to Raise Your Weapon when that dubstep part, that little drop down came, and I was like, oh, this must be dubstep, because it sounds like Transformers doing things. and sure enough, then the rest is like, that was I don't know. I mean, were you ever into dubstep at all?
I wasn't, so I really love that song. So Raise Your Weapon, the way it starts is so beautiful. I mean, some of the writing behind some of the songs, that's one of my all-time favorite songs from him. When it gets dubsteppy, I don't dislike it, but I'm not a big dubstep fan aside from that. But I mean, that song's amazing. I'm definitely familiar with like Skrillex and some of the big dubstep artists, but it's not something I listen to frequently. Yeah,
I mean, I don't really either. I just really appreciate the technical like madness of it, and I do like some of these drops are like super heavy, and I'm also really into like hardcore music. So, it was like it was kind of like this, and for me it was like just different. Like wow, like there's like something new. Like it's hard to create something new, like truly like unique. And I think dubstep was that at that time. And I think dubstep's kind of gone now. I don't know. I mean, I don't.
It-
It's just
well,
it's
it's
old.
interesting.
It's unsustainable, I think, to a degree, because what do? I mean, dubstep is all about just that, like, wobble
Maxing
bass,
out.
just maxing
Yeah,
out. Like,
yeah.
how many times can you do a crazy build to it, and then like drop?
Exactly.
It's like it's over. It's kind of,
Right.
it's still fun
Right.
if I don't listen to it for a while, and then all of a sudden, like, someone's like, listen to this new dubstep. I have a few friends that are really into it, and I'll be like, oh, that's cool. I appreciate that, but yeah, it's kind of had its day, I think. But
yeah, it's interesting. So I'm in the same boat. Like I've gone to some dubstep shows with my girlfriend because she's just a huge fan of electronic music. Whatever the show is here locally, like she's down to go. So we've gone to some, and you're right. I mean, it'll be like 30-second pause, build up to drop, back to like chill piece, like every 30 seconds. It's intense.
right.
But I have found, or I guess I haven't found. Someone shared with me recently that it's kind of taking an interesting turn where now big artists, like there's this guy named Keizo who's like really, really big in the dubstep scene. He's collaborating with Under Oath, and they're doing like, they're doing like dubstep, like
hardcore dubstep.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I just I know Korn even did that, like, back in the day, and I never even listened to Korn, but someone told me, like, oh, the new Korn album has dubstep in it, and I'm like,
yeah,
oh god, don't do it. And then Under Oath, that I grew up. I like Under Oath. I've seen them multiple times, and they're they're a lot of fun. But I kind of bummed that they're doing dubstep. I mean, it's like, that's weird.
That song "Boy Brushed Red." That was like one of my favorites of all time. And there's a live. I remember back at that time, it was so lucky if you found like a live video of any of those bands, like, because YouTube was just kind of starting. So, and you wouldn't have like a lot of DVDs of live performances. I had a few, I guess, but I would find some live sets of like Under Oath or Census Fail, and they were so like just intense and real, and I was just like captivated at a young age of those. So I remember specifically a Boy Brush Red live was like, one of the craziest things I've ever seen. I didn't see it live, I saw it on YouTube. But it was crazy.
I think we saw the same YouTube video, and we're like equally blown away by it, because there's nothing like it, and I think like a few albums later they did In Regards to Myself, which like I think is the greatest hardcore song, or one of them. I have a lot of hardcore friends. I have a lot of hardcore friends, and I hope they don't hear me say that, but I do think it's a good one. So
I'll have to check that out. I don't know if I've heard that. I switched gears a little bit in like 2007-ish and switched into like other music. So some of the stuff, like, as we were talking about Thrice earlier before we started the episode, like when they came out with was it Visu or what was the album that
Vihisu or something like that?
Was that what was after Artist in the Ambulance? You mentioned it earlier. That was the one that kind of switched gears, and I was just into other stuff.
Yeah, that one was. Let me see here. So
it was more relaxed.
Vihisu you're talking about, or you mean Beggars?
Oh no, sorry, Alchemy Index.
Oh, Alchemy
that
Index.
One yeah.
That one's definitely got a little, it's pretty heavy at times, but it's also pretty chill. And then after that, that was like the perfect blend. I mean, like, I think transitional album to kind of what they did with Beggars, which I think that came out next, because Beggars was not heavy. I mean, it was like, it had rock, it had some harder stuff, but nothing like their older stuff,
No, I'll always be a fan of Thrice. Now that I saw you went yesterday and saw them, and we were talking about it, I'm gonna go do some digging.
Do it.
Yeah.
So fun, man. Yeah. And go see them live if you can. They're so fun.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, I'm sure they'll come to Arizona. I'd like to do more of that. Like, now I see that bands that I grew up with are touring. Like, I really like Coheed for a while. They were a huge influence early on. I saw they were here. I don't know what happened. I think it might have been during the week, so I couldn't go. But yeah, it's sick. They're still playing music. They're still touring. I mean, it's awesome.
I know. My friend last week went to see Circus Survive, and I was just like, wow, like. And then he actually went to see Thrice as well. I was like, dude, what a week for him, just going down kind of like memory lane. Dude. I mean, geez.
For sure. Are you familiar with Sound of Animals Fighting?
Of course. Of
Oh
course.
yeah.
One
of my favorites.
incredible project for sure.
Yeah. I got to see. I didn't see one of my best friends went and saw when they did like the two. They had like just released that first album. I forget what the album's called, but they played like two shows. And it was like in Las Vegas, and it was everyone that was in that collaboration played. And there's videos after. There's like a DVD set. It looked amazing, man. I would have loved to have gone to that.
Seriously.
I saw them like 8 years later in Arizona, here in Phoenix. They played, and it was amazing. I mean, it was amazing. Yeah,
Man, that would be the show to see for sure.
Oh yeah, and I'm a huge fan of I don't know his name, but I know that the guy who formed Sound of Animals Fighting, he's a principal. So he worked, his day job was a principal at a high school, and he brought everyone together for the collaboration.
No
and he
way.
Worked on yeah, I don't know his name. I need to look it up, but he's like a huge influence for me because I do like the podcast for fun. I do music as a hobby. And like I have a day job. So to see that kind of thing for me, I'm like, oh man, there's people out there that are because I'm stuck here doing this, So I look at these guys, I'm like, oh man, well, that stuff's so crazy. But yeah, he's a high school professor or a high school principal, high school or middle school, and he had a music background. I think he'd probably played in like a band, but not as influential as like Circa or RX Bandits or anything like that. And yeah, he's like the guy who like started that formation. So
wow, that's so crazy to see or to hear. Wow.
Yeah, man. So it's cool. I'm glad. It's cool that I see. Of course, you're working on with the music. It's like orchestral and electronic for all these projects, and I want to share out some music at the beginning of an episode if you'd like. I mean, we can do that, or point people at least to music so they can hear your style and just to get a sense of what that is. But it's so cool that you also grew up in the same exact like interest musically that I did.
Oh gosh, for sure. I mean, although I will say like orchestral music was never an interest, to be honest. I just loved what it was capable of. But I mean, like growing up, I was really into like punk growing up. I was really into ska growing up.
Oh yeah.
I was a total ska kid, like junior high school. And but then it was like maybe around 15 where I discovered the Beatles. So then it was just like nothing but the Beatles. You ask anyone about me back then, it was like, yeah, Julian's the Beatle guy. Like he just is obsessed with the Beatles. And I couldn't get enough of what they did.
Yeah.
They just did so many genres. I think, that was maybe the inception of the love of different types of genres, or it was just so cool that they did so many different things. And so like in high school, I mean, I even got asked to be in like a hardcore band when I was, I think, like a junior, and I was so I was so like, my response to them was that's not real music, because I was so like to the Beatles, into Zeppelin, into at the Police, into all that stuff that I couldn't, like, the thought of like what hardcore music was like, I just couldn't like handle it. I was like, this is just noise, right? I was like an old man, like and then it was, but then actually the tipping point for me was friends of mine invited me to go see Seosin. Do you remember Seosin?
Oh yeah.
And so I saw Seosin at the Glass House, and we were at the back, and my buddy's like, as soon as they start playing, we're gonna be 5 feet from the front, because everyone's gonna rush. And I was like, no way. Like, sure enough, as soon as the song comes on, and it was just the most fun I've ever had in my life. I was crowd surfing. It was just like epic, and that was when I understood, heavy music, for sure. So,
and you got to see like Anthony Green in his prime.
This was unfortunately he had already moved on from the band. This is Cove.
Oh, okay.
This is the new guy, but still, I think this is like one of Cove's first shows with the band. He was great too.
Super talented. Oh yeah. And I mean, imagine the shoes you have to fill following it.
I feel bad for him.
That's super tough. It's like nearly impossible.
I know, but that first album they did was really good. I mean, that was I think they pulled it off. And then Anthony Green did, of course, Circus Survive, which was also really, really great. So What punk bands did you like, if you don't mind me asking? Because I love punk as well.
a huge NoFX fan. That was my band.
NoFX is really cool. I can't say that I was like because I
Too
moved
into 'em?
quick from punk to ska, but like I really loved like MXPX. I don't know if you ever knew them.
Oh yeah, they're a great band. Yeah.
There is a band called Value Pack. There was God, who else? I'm trying to remember. Those are probably, some of my favorite ones at the time. And then it just kind of quickly moved to ska actually, and it was like Five Iron Frenzy and Mighty
Less
Mighty
Than
Boss
Jake.
Tones, Less Than
Oh,
Jake.
Mighty Mighty Boss Tones are great. Yeah.
Even the
No,
OC Supertones. I don't even know if you ever heard of them, but
No, I've never.
just it was a good time for sure. But yeah, punk. I didn't live too much in the punk world, to be honest. But
Yeah. I just was a huge NoFX fan, but like punk fans hated NoFX, so they were like hated amongst punk fans because they were like, I think, a little too mainstream. But I just thought they wrote the best melodies, man. I'm just still such a fan of NoFX. For as long as I live, they'll be one of my favorite bands, and I'm a huge fan of that band. And so yeah, anyways, but I mean, the punk scene hates them because they're just, punk is, you got to be DIY and like, live under a bridge if you're like really punk, and so
don't take
didn't
showers.
really click. Right, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, man, dude, it's so cool. I just love going off on these tangents too, just to like just talk about music too, because it's just it's awesome, man. It's cool to see that you've had this whole path, right, and this influence of all these all these bands and all these different genres growing up, and it's evolved into this thing where if you listen to the music you've shared on your website or in a given project, it's this really cool melding of electronic and orchestral, and it's just so cool to see that what that process is like, and what's influenced you along the way, and what's allowed this to happen.
Yeah, it's all part of it. That's for sure.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, I really appreciate you doing this, man. I think when we were speaking just like maybe a week or two ago, you're wrapping up a project with NASA, like a NASA project, which is like so crazy. I'm like, contacting you over Instagram. You're like, can we just, could next week might work really well because I'm working with NASA right now. I was like, what the fuck? So
man.
it's, yeah, man, I know you got to be like super busy, which is good because that means like projects are happening. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this and talk about, your path, the creativity behind the music, and all this really cool stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny to think back about this conversation right now, because we've just talked about like, just life. And I think to me, that is what, I pull from, and everything in the past, is, and right now I really feel like I'm just kind of hitting this point where, things are, really moving forward, in a really great direction. And I'm really grateful to be doing this, and to be, I'm in talks with Nat Geo right now to do some stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully next year, some of that works out, or it won't. I don't know. I mean, we could talk. We didn't even talk about the actual biz aspect of this, but there's plenty of times where you get these projects that you're almost signed on to do them, and then something happens. So
yeah.
So I never until it's on my hard drive do I get excited about it, but it is an exciting time for sure. And I'm doing so much with the kind of the natural history, the wildlife world, which I love, and I'm kind of getting into that. And that's why I was in England last month for a film festival. One of the films I did last year was nominated for an award, and so I went down. I went there to be a part of that, and the Nat Geo was there, the BBC was there, Disney Nature is there, Netflix is now getting into that game, and hopefully I can stay in that world a little bit as well, because it is pretty fun to work with guys like NASA, JPL, and all those people, Ocean X, and everything that they do. And so
Oh, it's awesome, man. And yeah, one thing I will make sure to do is, point everyone to the projects that you've done, that coming like at the beginning of the episode, because I do want to make sure that all that is there for given listeners to check out, because it's a lot, man. I went through and looked on your website, and just to see that you're working with all these different projects, it's super cool. And I would imagine that it's exciting too, because the projects are changing, right? So, I would just think that having these stints of like whatever it is, 2 months, 3 months, or whatever it is to work on a project, and then it's done, then you get to switch gears and you're like, all right, this is totally different. Last thing was for Asahi beer, and now I'm working with Nat Geo or whatever it might be. It's like totally different vibes that you're going for with a project.
You don't even know. It's so funny, dude. Like, I mean, even working with different camps of, different people that, on different spectrums of society and, maybe political belief or whatever. It's like, everyone's got like interesting projects, and it's so, sometimes I laugh because, it's like, I just get to work on so much and so many different things that I and personally I love it. I think it's so creatively fulfilling to work with different people and really, collaborate with all, people that come from all different backgrounds and different production crews, different, projects, different films. It's always something new. And that is what I love about this, because, if I wasn't creating, God, I don't even know what I would do. That would just be, I would implode.
Yeah, no, dude, I totally understand. I found myself with just a regular job. If I didn't have stuff outside work, I would lose my mind. Like this pursuit with the podcast is so fulfilling. I absolutely love doing it. And then for quite a while, there was music that I'd leave work, I'd just work on music. And then now this is kind of pushing out, but I totally agree. Having those things that you can express yourself, you can be creative, are so needed.
Yeah. I love what you're doing, man. I think it's very inspiring to me. And I've done the day job thing. And if you were, if you saw that I had worked for apps, you saw that I worked for a company called Big Fish Audio, and I made virtual instruments, and that paid the bills for many years. And I, worked the 9 to 5, and after 5 o'clock, my deal with them was I then, start working on my own stuff. So for many years, I would work 80-hour weeks, because I'd be on a gig, and there's no other choice. I would just have to start work at 5 o'clock, and so I had to learn how to actually write exhausted, or learn how to preserve myself, or learn how to write fast. That's actually what taught me how to write fast, because once it hits midnight, you're useless, because you have to wake up and get back to work at 8 a.m. And it's just like, God, it got to the point where if I didn't have a gig, it was a vacation for me, because I would just work 40 hours a week,
Yeah.
And, so, I think what you're doing is really cool, and I'm very interested to see where this goes for you, because I think this could go somewhere really exciting, maybe that you don't even expect, or, you don't foresee, but I think, this is going to put you in contact with a lot of people, and it's interesting to see where this will go. I can't wait to see, because it's a great channel. It's a great concept. It's a great, I think a lot of people, I'm going to totally blow this, up as much as I can. And,
awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
And maybe try to get a few other people to repost, just to, spread the word about this podcast. Because I think it's just a great podcast. So,
dude, thank you. I honestly, just you coming on is fucking awesome, man. Seriously, like I when I started this, I had no idea that I would be able to speak with people like yourself, or just on the other side of the spectrum with like electronic producers who they're releasing on like Mousetrap, who I just like idolize. Like, just, I really would have been like, okay, maybe at episode 100, this kind of stuff would work out, man. It's super, super cool. So I thank you for saying that. I really, and thank you for coming on, man. It's super fun. And the weirdest thing about this is, for whatever reason, like doing episodes and releasing episodes has been way more fulfilling for me than working on music. I told my girlfriend the same thing. I'm like, if I release, say, a song and I send it to some buddies or whatever, and I get feedback, it's awesome. But when I release an episode and someone reaches out and they're like, dude, I listened to this episode, is so awesome. And even though I'm kind of just like a facilitator for conversation, it's like mostly learning about your path for whatever reason. It's just like super, super exciting. So I plan to keep doing it and, see what the hell happens. But yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. You'll be interviewing Deadmau5 in no time.
Dude, that I would have I'd probably a panic attack.
Don't be surprised, man. Don't be surprised.
Fuck, dude. I don't know, but I really honestly humbly appreciate that, man. I really, really do. So, and another thing too, I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I really do mean this. If you want to do this again in 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is, I would be more than happy to do it down the road when different projects have happened. There will be, of course, more exciting things. So I'm always on board to do it.
Let's do it. I would love to.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Well, awesome. Thanks again, man.
Yep. Thank you so much.
All right, so that is it. Episode 17 is done. Thank you to Julian for having this conversation with me. Thank you to you for listening and hopefully enjoying. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you'd like, go check out his music and previous projects at his website. I think that's the best way to find him. So JulianCisneros.com. Same at Instagram. So if you'd like to just go follow him on Instagram. Again, thank you for coming on. Thank you for listening. I loved this episode. So I hope you enjoyed it. More episodes to come. Look for the next episode coming next Wednesday, and I will speak with you all again soon.